I'm Dan. I wear a few different hats. One is a founder of Velocifier, which is a coaching business for tech, everything tech, software developers, software leaders. And I'm also the CTO of homes.com.au, where we are coming up with new and inventive ways to search for real estate in Australia, which is all fun. How about you, Fred? What are you about?
Well, I don't wear hats. I wear a cap. I should have been wearing a cap tonight, but I'm a one-man band with maybe one or two secrets up my sleeve. Principal engineer, everything to do with engineering, hopefully, and then some mentoring and coaching on the side.
So tonight's topic, we're going to talk all about junior software developers.
Junior software developers.
Junior software developers. That's the topic came about just from some discussions I was having in the past week, where they were talking about reflecting upon where some of the challenges that junior software developers have at the moment in entering the workforce. I want to ask you a question, Fred. Do you think, I hear different things from different people. Some people tell me that the job market is all fine, that everything's fine, or it's coming back or something like that. And then I hear from some people that the job market is down and it's hard to find work. What do you think?
Probably a mixture, similar to what you're saying. There's definitely less opportunities available. And I think the number of applications and people looking for specific opportunities is definitely increased.
Yeah, I reckon it's interesting about juniors, right? Because I think there's always say if you think about every year, there's universities, colleges push, training people, releasing people, qualifying people, and they're coming into the job market. Then you have boot camps and things like that where people are learning tech and software and coding, and they're continually, graduating people as well. So it's interesting, I think, that I would suspect that I have been involved in a few programs where they have grads and stuff coming in at a few previous workplaces. And there always seems to be, a whole bunch of people, 200, 300 people, and only X amount of roles available. Maybe it's 20 roles available. I think, I have heard, so something I have heard is that the job market particularly for junior level engineers, probably mid-level, is a lot tougher at the moment than it has been in the past. I hear also that maybe lead staff engineers, principal engineers are relatively still in demand, reasonably, but the kind of junior to mid side is hard work for people. I think so. It's interesting, right? Because I do get quite a few people reaching out to me on LinkedIn and other places saying, "Oh, hey, are you hiring, junior engineers?" Or some have reached out to me when I put it publicly that I would help people with their resumes, and I had a couple of graduates or soon-to-be graduates stick their hand up and say, "Oh, hey, can you have a look at my resume?" And I always find it interesting, when you review resumes for junior engineers. I think what I've been reflecting on is maybe there are ways for a junior developer to stand out from the rest. What do you reckon?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's becoming more and more important to be unique in some form of aspect when you present yourself to opportunities. And I think the expectation of being a bit more polished at the beginning is also there. But I think a lot of it is also just a number game. Being that there is so many applicants looking, if you're talking about grads, the programs available, I think the number of grads looking has definitely gone up. But if we then look at what resources and opportunities for juniors, seniors, all the way up to get exposure and to demonstrate the skills and abilities that organizations would be looking for, that's increased. So it's I think there's more responsibility on the individual to prepare well before putting their hand up and saying, look, I'm keen to be selected for a role.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I don't think I ever did this when I was in my earlier career years, but I find it maybe fascinating coming now that I'm in my current phase of my career, where I'm kind of more leadership side. It's kind of very interesting having a lot of years spent as a hiring manager, because I think like I see certain patterns. Like it's kind of interesting. You see a whole bunch of hundreds and hundreds of resumes, hundreds and hundreds of applicants, code exercises, reviews, interviews, all that kind of stuff. And I think there are definitely patterns there that I can see, but I think it's very hard for when you're on the other side. Like when you're a candidate or looking for work, looking for a new job, or looking for, say, a junior developer role, I don't think it's obvious how you are perceived by a hiring manager who would have seen like hundreds of applications. You don't get to see those hundreds of applications. So you have this kind of gap where you know about yourself and you have your own resume, but that's the only data point you have. Maybe you have a job ad. Maybe you have some kind of marketing collateral for a grad program or something like that. I don't know. It's always find it interesting. And I'm kind of keen to help junior engineers like have the knowledge of the patterns, I guess, that I can see, because I think that's useful for people. Like if they could see what I could see, I think, you would have all this information to be able to tweak stuff, like add additional things into your resume that other people don't have, and be able to stand out and things like that. And without that, the advantage of seeing all those patterns, it's hard, I reckon, to see or to understand, be in the shoes of a hiring manager. I don't think it's completely, like, it's not obvious, I don't think. What do you reckon?
No, look, if I had to put myself in a hiring manager's shoes, I think one of the biggest challenges is that if the more applicants you have to deal with, the impact and the opportunity for the candidate to be recognized, I think that reduces, because there's too much noise. So then it becomes, there's no way that I can see an engineering manager looking at 600 applicants, and then out of the 600 would be saying, I'm 100% confident that I've just chosen the best 10 for the next round. At some point, you're basically going to look at a few people that's maybe good enough in that group, but it's not going to be the best. And the candidate could be one or two that's put in the effort, they've gone through, the recommendations, they've gone through the process of trying to stand out, but because of the numbers, it's just not possible. And I think that's where those additional strategies probably starts coming into play, to create early stickiness. Before
maybe it's buying donuts for the hiring manager in the interviews and saying, bringing donuts into the interview.
Probably not donuts.
Hey, it's been done before and it worked on me. I was like, yeah, this person's great. Donuts.
Yeah.
How can you go wrong?
Yeah. All right. Okay.
You don't reckon? You reckon bring gifts into the interviews?
No. Well, it depends on the gift. No, we don't think. No, we don't condone receiving gifts and interviews.
Fair.
I think it's very hard. I think it's, for me, the big thing is it's a number game. You have to put yourself out there as much as possible, and one of the opportunities, you'll be recognized. and in using your channels, your network, to be able to create some form of identity before you even reach out, or even once you've reached out to say, like, hey, I'm really interested in this role, to see if you can have a conversation with whoever is in that space, create some form of a connection.
Yeah. I have this idea. Tell me if you think this is a crazy idea, right? But
Dan and his ideas. Here we go.
Get ready.
Hold on.
Get ready. You knew this was coming. You knew this was coming. So I was thinking about it, right? That I get a lot of people sometimes reach out to me and they say, they'll kind of pitch themselves, right? So they'll say, hey, I know JavaScript, or I know Python or Ruby or something, and this is like, what I'm interested in, or what I worked on, or things like that, right? What I studied. I think that's okay, right? And admittedly, if a developer has a resume that hits my desk, my mailbox, maybe it's not desks anymore because I don't print out resumes, but let's say it's in my inbox.
Save the trees.
If there's sorry, what was that?
Save the trees.
Yes, that's right, exactly. If I see a GitHub link, right, or open source link, or some kind of software, or a blog or something like that, I'll click on it, guaranteed, and I'll look at their code, and I will be looking for certain things around, like how they can code, what their kind of skill level is at, what kind of project they've done, all of that kind of thing. All those little things, I think, speak more to me than a resume, right? Admittedly, I actually mostly ignore resumes a lot. Not 100%, but maybe 80, 90% of it's kind of ignored. But code, for me personally, when I'm hiring, code is like speaks a lot louder than words. So my idea was, right, what if you're a junior developer and you're working on a project, and what if you went and asked, this could be a bad idea because I might get hit up for a lot of people reaching out to me. What if you could reach out to people like me or you and say, hey, I've been working on this project and I'm really keen to learn and I want to get better. Can you give me a review? Or here's a pull request. I just did a pull request for this new feature. This is the plan. This is the goal. This is what I want it to do. I think maybe the code could be better, but this is the approach that I've made. This is what I've been thinking about. What do you think? What do you reckon of that idea?
Look, I think it's a good idea in Sorry, I'm just thinking about the donuts that somebody gave me, and it's
well, donuts is obviously the winner out of all of the advice we're giving.
Should have had donuts today with my coffee. I think reaching out and asking somebody to say, "Hey, I've just developed this piece of code. It's hosted in a cloud provider that I'm using. Please have a look. Give me some feedback." And then, similar to what you would be doing, using one of the, like LinkedIn, to build up some form of a network to start gaining traction and multiple people looking at your code and giving you some feedback. Opportunity for you to learn straight off the bat, but it's also the opportunity to connect, and hopefully in that process, somebody's going to come back and say, hey, I just like the way you code. I like the way you think. I like the way you comment, the way you provide your PR. Multiple ways of doing it. I think, I think we should, more people should be open to connecting and having a conversation with somebody and looking at code or saying, hey, try this. Or I think it is extremely important that if you're starting out, that you get comfortable with writing code, writing tests, getting comfortable with knowing a cloud provider, understanding more and more of the aspects. I think the expectation, my personal expectation would be that that's what I'm looking for. in a junior engineer. Somebody doesn't have to be perfect, but somebody that's already gone to the point when, like you said, you receive a resume and you're receiving some code, that code is in such a quality that you can get a sense of that this person actually understands the connections and the building blocks that they would have to use on a daily basis. That's the differentiator that I would be looking for.
Yeah. I think one thing I do see, maybe it's from one particular boot camp, which I won't name, but one particular setup, I have been involved in seeing a bunch of junior developers at graduation time. I saw all their profiles, I think, right? So someone sent me all their profiles. And when I was looking through their profiles, they all kind of looked the same because they all did group work on particular projects. And so you saw from everybody kind of worked on, the final project for the boot camp was to build this thing, whatever that was, right? Some website or something like that. But everyone built the same thing. So when you look through 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 profiles, it's all looking the same to me. Maybe it's like what you were describing there about, build something that is of the best quality that you can do, which is, I guess, a no-brainer. But going the extra mile, I think, like writing tests, like writing good documentation for it, maybe, stepping someone through it in some way or form. Maybe it's through documentation or maybe it's through a mixture of a whole bunch of things. And maybe even also a project that no one else has done in your cohort, which unfortunately is extra work. But I think there's something to be said for, it is a way to stand out. If there's 50 people with the same project, really, and similar level of code quality, I think you have to do something to stand out, I guess, out of all those 50 people. Like, do you do something extra? Maybe it's extra in documentation and quality and testing, but maybe it's also like building something additional to that on the side. And that can be hard, actually, because some of the boot camps are quite intensive. So, you do spend a lot of time and work hours per week actually in coursework. But I don't know, I can't help thinking there must be ways like that to stand out from 50 other people that are graduating at the same time.
My advice to junior engineers is to, especially if they're already in an organization, is to continuously working on their profile. So focusing profile in your team, right? So what you'd be doing, how you, your contribution to day-to-day work, your engagement with your manager, right? That strategy to improve and to be in a position to be promoted. So it's all about their plan, the conversations you're having. But I can see that profile, so expanding that into the organization itself, right? So identifying individual areas where you can contribute, either communities or writing blogs or contributing to reviews for other teams. Not to say that you're probably not 100% confident in a sense of what you will be providing in a space, but you're demonstrating that characteristics that a person be looking for, and knowing that we all need to participate in that. And I think if you take that kind of concept and you take it outside of an organization and you're telling an engineer or a junior engineer, well, I want to see your profile. I want to see your profile is going to give me an indication of who you are as an individual, as an engineer. The way you participating in open source projects, or the way you're managing your own GitHub repo, in the little projects that you're doing, or maybe you are writing blogs. Maybe you're not a good writer, but you're still trying to do something. Some form of activity that gives an indication that you are invested in your career, instead of just saying, like, I've done a boot camp or I've got my degree, now I'm on a job. I should get a job, instead of showing that it's changed. There's so much that we need to do.
Actually, no. There was someone I saw once on LinkedIn. I was either connected to them for some reason, and I don't think I've ever worked with them, but maybe just a rando connection. They started, actually, I think they were doing a different, they might have been a recruiter previously, and they were teaching themselves to code. And I think this person really had a passion for graphics, like games and stuff like that. They started building a game in public, basically. So he started building certain parts of it and demoing it, just putting a video together and putting it on LinkedIn. And it was actually really cool. Like some of the things you're watching it, and I'm kind of watching it just for entertainment reasons, I guess. Like it's just interesting. But watching his project progress, like every month or something like that, I didn't track it very closely, but I remember just watching a few videos as he was building it, and you see the evolution of like, you know, the physics system and stuff like that, where objects are interacting, and you see like placeholders for some types of graphics, and he's like building it and making it better and better. The end result was actually amazing, like incredible when he ended up, like, I think it took him probably a year to build it. But now he's working as a game developer. So I'm like, awesome, man. Like that's the dream, I think. Right. But I think building that project in the first place, awesome, right? Just building it in the first place. But the work that he did, probably just to take a video of it, put it on LinkedIn. I mean, maybe he used other channels as well, but I just saw it on LinkedIn. And he didn't really add much explanation or like, you know, big write-ups on what he was doing. It's just like, hey, I'm working on this thing. Here's where I'm up to. Here's a video. And it was awesome. That was great. I think that's a really cool example.
What was the game? Do you remember?
It was like a RPG, I think, type game, like 3D first person, not a shooter game, but similar, not quite Minecraft, but kind of sort of Minecrafty with like medieval RPG concepts and stuff. It was cool. So maybe maybe that's a good example. Probably a lot of work, but I suppose like the things we're talking about though are probably a lot of work.
I think any investment, if you want to get somewhere, there's got to be effort, and there's going to be periods of it being very hard. I think the thing that's probably easier these days in comparison to a number of years ago is the fact that there's so many different channels available to be able to get information, and I think a lot of experienced people are open to being asked the question and to help and support. So I think that really helps with, if you're starting out and going, all right, I need to know something, or asking questions or getting some advice. And I mean, our friend AI coming into the equation now as well makes it even easier. The opportunities are endless. Yep. We just need to press the button.
Very true. Very true. No, I like the theme that we've been talking about inviting, like, say, managers, leaders, other maybe more senior engineers, inviting them into the process through like feedback, things like that, or showing off what you've built. I think that's a good way to build those relationships. Like you're saying about building networks, I think if you're showing a lot of engineers, they really enjoy engineering, like they really enjoy helping somebody who's able to accelerate and go fast, learn quickly, build something interesting. A lot of people are willing to help, I think. So I think that's a good move. I wanted to... Yeah, go.
Sorry. No, I was just thinking something that I recently experienced. I think as individuals, sometimes we just want somebody to listen to us and to be in a position to say, look, I have ideas, but I just don't know what to do. Like you were talking about, where do you start? Right? So you want to apply for something, but you either doubting yourself, maybe you're less confident in that process. Just to have somebody to say, hey, should I be doing this? should I invest more time in this space? Just to have somebody with a bit more experience that is willing to spend a half an hour or an hour and just saying, you're doing fine. I like what you're doing. Keep on doing that. Because sometimes I think we look at what the media provides and we see all these LinkedIn posts with this great content and all this amazing stuff happening. We think, I should be there. I should already be at that level. And we don't really see in the background how much goes into that and the years of experience. So just to give somebody a bit of confidence and saying, hey, where you are, the number of years experience and what you've done so far, you're doing great.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's. I think what I've seen is there are many different types of, content out there, or say like socials, LinkedIn, whatever, Twitter, just where you're. Yes, there are certainly people there with a lot of experience and giving advice or opinions or expertise, but then you may look at that and go, I've got nothing to bring because I don't have 20 years in the industry. So what can I talk about? But I think just showing learning is interesting, because I think too, when you've been in the industry for 20 years, you kind of forget, you forget how hard it was, and you forget, I think a lot of software developers really love learning, a lot of really great ones. And so seeing people learn, and even people who are learning new things that you haven't learnt before, that's always a great thing. I actually really enjoy, say if I'm interviewing an engineer, I really love if they've done something I haven't done before, because I can ask them about it. They can teach me. I can learn something new. Like that's the best thing, I think. I think that's awesome. So maybe if you're learning something, just having the learnings or just talking about the learnings or showing how you're progressing, or, that can be great content.
Absolutely.
I would give it a thumbs up and a like and a comment.
I would give it a smiley,
and I'd watch.
A smiley and a donut.
Yeah. A donut, yeah. I'd put a donut emoji on that. Yeah. Thumbs up. So I wanted to ask you, Fred, because I've seen a few different approaches to learning how to be a software developer, right? And if you look at different types of degrees, different types of boot camps, learn to code things, resources on the internet, all that stuff, you could start with anything, basically, but there seems to be a lot of tutorials or a lot of starting points which talk about JavaScript as a good option.
JavaScript.
Right? Now, I'm absolutely biased because I don't really like JavaScript, but I wanted to get your opinion on it, Fred. Do you think JavaScript is a good starting programming language if you're learning?
I don't think it's the language. For me, it doesn't matter which language. There's from a commercial perspective and opportunities for roles, language becomes important. And I guess it's also about selecting the correct language for solving certain problems. But if you're starting out and you want to learn something, if it were me starting out now again, the first thing I would do is look at the ratings of the most popular languages. So which of those be used on a regular basis, and I'll probably invest in that space. If JavaScript is something that is well used, which it is, when we chuck a bit of TypeScript on top of that, and that's going to create an opportunity for me to get a position, or to have tools available that is not linked to a license, so reducing the cost to gain experience. That's the one I would go with. I would probably exclude Ruby from that, but that's just a personal preference.
I don't know how that's possible. How could you exclude Ruby from anything?
It's very easy. It's called delete.
Never. That sounds like a JavaScript problem to me. I reckon if I was starting again, I reckon Python would be a good choice.
Python's a good choice, yeah.
It's popular enough. It's one thing. I mean, there's pros and cons to Python. One, and its pro is also its con. I think is that it's quite flexible. Actually, JavaScript suffers from this as well. It's quite flexible, so you can do a lot of things with it, and you can write. You're kind of free to write all different styles of code, right? Like you can write stuff that's kind of functional. You can write stuff that's kind of imperative. You can write stuff that is more object based, right? You're not really, and even if I think about Python has the ability to just hack stuff as well. You can hack a script together just to, instead of a shell script, you might go, instead of Bash, I'm going to use Python because it gives me a bit more power. A lot of people do that, right? So it's got a lot of flexibility, but I think sometimes that's also its downside. And I see that in JavaScript as well, right? Because you can write code where you don't have, there's not many opinions about how good code could be done. Well, there's opinions, but it's not built into the language, I should say, right? So when you look at Python itself, it's basically like, yeah, you could do this or you could do that. I've built a game in Python. And that was fun. Like I don't know Python hugely well. I'm not an expert in Python, but I built a game in it, and I'd never done a game before, so I was learning how to do game development at the same time. But it was fun. It was. I figured out that was it pass by. I can't even remember how Python does this. It's a weird and wonderful way of, how a language might have a pass by reference or not, pass by value. Python's take on it is very strange. So I learnt that because I wanted to, being a game, I didn't have much in the way of good engineering practices because I'm basically building globals all over the place because state in the game is just shared with everything, right? So you're not kind of you're not following all these good software engineering principles a lot of the time. But it was kind of interesting looking at how Python does that. That was something I learned about Python because I was thinking, how can I pass this state into this object, and then learnt that it's kind of quite weird and wonderful the way that it actually passes a copy of your object, I think, into something else. So that was a bit interesting. But but I thought Python is, I don't know, I think that would be a good choice. And it's used a lot. I mean, it's used a lot in data and stuff like that these days. But I think it's used in a lot of other areas as well. So
it does open you up for it to pivot down a different avenue, especially from a data science perspective. But I think it really comes down to, so you want to choose a language that is going to enable you to continue developing. Right? So it's like buying a car. You can have a vintage car. You can drive it around. Now and again, it's going to break. Not everybody will be able to fix that vintage car. You can talk about it. You can say, I drive a vintage car and it's really nice and it still drives beautifully. Or you can go with something that's commercially available, something that's easy to maintain. That you can get spare parts for it. Maintenance, going to a garage to get it fixed, generally available. If you had to go to another garage, it's easy to go to another garage because of what the choice you've made. But I think it's the underlying, and you mentioned it earlier about the fact that it's learning good practices, the way you're writing code, understanding the implementation. And if you can build those foundations, then it's going to enable you to select multiple languages, because then it becomes easier to pick up a new language and to have one or two strong experience in a language that makes you a bit more marketable. You'll notice my focus is a lot about how do you contribute to your skill to ensure that the market wants you, because there's no point in having a T-shirt that says "I love Java" if nobody wants a Java developer.
True. True, very true. So what programming language did you learn on first, Fred? What was your first?
So my journey is probably a little bit different to, I started out with VB6. So I'm a Microsoft.
Microsoft Die Hard.
Yeah. I want to say Die Hard. Yeah, that's a bit, lock me off. No, I think, and for me, it comes down to it's a language. Was a language easy to pick up? So I didn't go to university after school and decided that I'm going to become a engineer. I'm going to learn how to program. It came in later in my career, I looked at a book with VB code in it, and I could understand it. And I thought, and it's the same, I guess, building the confidence around understanding how to do it. So you look at coding, go like, oh, this makes sense. I can write this bit of code and see what's the output. Oh, this is nice. And then from there, went to .NET became available a few years later, and then did VB.NET, and then pivoted to C#. And then C# was the language that I used probably for a very long time. I did a bit of Ruby down the track.
Very lucky to do some Ruby.
Yeah. No, it's not very lucky. You were talking about global. Yeah, it's the concept of you can do anything. Tell me the rules, give me the boundaries. No boundaries, you just go play.
Go for it.
Yeah. But I think it's important to be cautious of the languages you choose. But I also think these days I think it's more important the ability to pick up a new language quite quickly. And just to make sure that whatever you invest in is going to enable you to continue to be in a position to be a developer.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, interesting fact that I don't really share with people very often, because depending on how you count from when I first did programming, my actual first program was on VB6 as well. But all it did was I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have a book. I had I think it was like a little window that popped up and Homer Simpson was on there. And then when you clicked on a button, it made some Simpsons quote or something like that. That was my first program.
And the banks are still using it.
It probably still runs in Windows 10 or whatever today. So there you go.
It's a good language.
Yeah. I never actually got into BASIC much. I actually learnt C for my first real programming when I actually started learning how to program. It was in C. And I enjoyed C, actually. C was great. I've only had the opportunity once to go back and use C in a project. So I learnt it in university. And then one time someone asked me, can you build a little app that would talk to a serial port and read some data off a serial port and send it to this other serial port? I was like, yeah. I thought maybe I should use C for that. It's probably a good choice. So, and it worked. I was like, wow, that's cool. I can still write C after all these years. Like, that's cool. So it was fun. But yeah, I did enjoy C. And then I moved to C++ and was like, what is this? That was just, no, the C++ was not for me. But C was great. But yeah, no, I can highly recommend Ruby as a language to learn. So we're in agreement, Fred.
So we're going to edit that out.
That's going to be the title of the video. All junior engineers should learn Ruby. That would actually get a lot of clicks. People would be like, what? No way. Click.
I think all engineers should learn Go.
Go. Yeah. Go's good.
Go.
Or Elixir. I like Elixir. You're going to learn Elixir. Have you done Elixir yet, Fred?
No.
Oh, it's got to be on your to-do list.
I'll put it on my list. First thing to do is figure out how to buy donuts for my next interview without getting into trouble. And then I'll learn a new language.
I don't know how if you brought donuts to an interview, I don't know how it could go wrong. How could it go wrong? There is no wrong in donuts, surely.
There's a hole in it. And I think the hole is there's a loophole. Yeah.
Yes, there's a catch, right?
Yeah.
There's
Hi, I brought some donuts.
it builds distrust, you're saying. So if you bring donuts as a gift, it builds distrust because of the hole. I get it. I got you. I'm picking up what you're
thinking
putting
more like Danish, like nice Danish or tuna.
Yeah.
Nice coffee with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I would be in serious trouble if somebody brought me a coffee at the beginning of the interview. A good coffee, like this. Yeah.
You'd be like, hi, this person.
I would look at the code and go, and it could be horrible. Be like, oh, what is this? And I would say, oh, this is beautiful. You know how to code. You're the best.
Yep. There you go. So if you buy coffee for someone, just put a little bit extra in there so that they're very happy to see your code and to interview you and hire you. It's good advice.
So we're talking about junior developers and how to help and support them. How important then for you is the technical assessment or test as part of a recruitment process?
For juniors in particular?
Juniors, grads, seniors.
Yeah. I think, I don't think you can expect, because like there's a whole lifetime of learning ready to go, ready to come for this person, right? And there's no way you're going to be able to look at anything in that realm, I don't think, because that hasn't happened yet. That's all future for that person, right? So I think though more what you're looking at is how do we think this person is going to go on that journey, right? I think it's more of a question of maybe not where they're at technically, although there is some value in, say, having a discussion around what they've learnt so far and what that's taught them about technical things, fundamentals, or what their understanding, what their level of understanding is, how they've applied it into what they've done so far. I guess that is still a good place to start. But I think the other part is to say, well, and I think this actually comes from the discussion of what they've done coming up to this point. Because if you dig into what they've done so far, if you get a feel for what they've picked up, what they've learnt, what they've understood, and how they've applied it, and what mechanisms they use to learn, then I think you should be able to kind of extrapolate out and go, well, for the next couple of years, I think this person has the right approach, mindset. They've demonstrated that they've been able to learn these fundamental things. I think they would be able to apply themselves to learn what has to come next. Because if you're kind of imagining that, the next, say, 2 years at least for this person is just going to be sponge mode, where they're just kind of trying to learn everything that's around them and trying to, I guess, craft this skill of like being able to write software systems, right, to some level of scale. So I think you're not necessarily looking for technical prowess. I think you're more looking for understanding of what they've done so far and how you think they're going to be applying themselves for like the next couple of years of learning. And some of it, I think like what you were talking about earlier at the start, where you were talking about some of these examples of things that they could do to demonstrate who they are themselves and to put in a bit extra, I suppose, above other people. But that gives you things to talk about in the interview as well, right? So we were talking a lot about putting your foot in the door, but when you get in the door and you're in the interview, those kinds of talking about those projects and being able to say, yeah, I did this and I had to learn this and this was really hard and, I got to figure it out. And, those stories about how you learned, that's what I'm kind of trying to dig into, I think. And so if I can see, I actually do this for senior engineers as well, right? Because one of the core criteria I hire upon is how people learn. Like, how good are you at learning stuff? Because there's always going to be something new coming. So whether you're junior, grad, or senior, tech doesn't really sit still. Nothing really stays the same. We started on VP6, right? But it doesn't really exist anymore. It still does, but technically, it's not being used in a commercial context in any place I've seen. So I think you can look back over time and go, well, tech changes, programming languages change. .NET was only invented X number of years ago, right? It didn't exist before that time. So you're kind of in a role in an industry where you are continually learning. So that's actually probably one of the core criteria I'm looking for when I hire an engineer at any level.
Do you think the institutions and these boot camps are enabling engineers or preparing them for what we are looking for? That exactly what you just said, the continuous learning, demonstrating the ability to do that, in an interview.
I think some are getting better. Yeah. I would say like 10 years ago, I would have said no. Probably a pretty strong no. And I've actually been in an event once where I was on stage with someone who ran a training provider and said, training providers can't keep up with the pace of learning of what an engineer has to do day to day. And everyone was kind of silent, like shocked. Oh my God, he said that. And there's a training provider guy right there. But I think that is still true though. When I don't think formal education, formal training is actually really difficult to have that mode of learning applied to the tech industry just because of the speed of change. So I think it's much better to teach those skills of learning, self-learning and self-taught, self-driving, self-motivated learning. That I think is key. Now, are they teaching that? I think in some areas they are. I've seen some glimpses of it. There was one, and this was actually almost 10 years ago, actually. I interviewed a junior guy who I think had been like 2 years into his degree, something like that, and we were having a chat. And I looked at his degree because he had some information on his resume about the things that he was learning. And it was cool. It was actually really cool. He was building Linux kernel modules. He was doing all this cool stuff. And I was like, this is cool, man. I want to go back to university and learn this stuff. This would be awesome, right? So there are some that are doing quite interesting things. A kind of boot campy place that I went down into the city and met some of the cohorts of students, and they're learning C as their first language at that boot camp. And I thought that's actually pretty cool because it's hard, but I think the approach, one downside of, say, just pulling JavaScript off the shelf, right, and going, I'm just going to build a website. I'm going to do something in React, or I'm going to, build something that is just stitching pieces together, right? The downside of that, I think, is your depth of understanding and skill level is quite shallow, I think. And I think it causes two problems, I think. One is that you're relatively shallow in skills. But the other problem is that if you're stitching things together, you're not necessarily understanding like fundamentals. If something broke in that, how do you know how to fix it? How do you know what your tools are doing or the fundamentals of principles behind things, right? And I think having knowledge or starting with that kind of knowledge is really important. And then there's kind of skills that you can apply into different contexts, right? So when you see, one simple example was that, I started Ruby on Rails when it was like version 0.9 or something, right? And no one was using it. It was kind of brand new. And I didn't know it was going to take off and be huge for a few years. But what was interesting about that was that there were a whole bunch of frameworks that copied Ruby on Rails, right? And in different languages. So there's one in PHP, there's one in .NET, stuff like that, right? And when you go into those code bases, you can actually pick them up very quickly, right? And so that's kind of fascinating to me, right? You learn some fundamental skills and patterns, understand how things are put together. And then I actually think in tech, even though things change a lot and new things come out all the time, there are still some fundamental things that are like 60 years old that have not changed, right? And I think understanding those principles are probably super highly valuable, right, to someone, particularly to someone who's learning. If you understand those kind of concepts, then you can apply that knowledge into all sorts of different areas. So I reckon that's a pretty strong case, I think, I would say, to really understand fundamentals instead of just, picking something off and just going shallow. I don't think that serves people very well. You're wondering about, is there Rails in .NET, right?
For a moment, I felt very shocked and scared. Fear came into me, and I was
like, what?
Rage. But
so you thought you could never touch Ruby again, but I got bad news for you.
For the moment, I feel dirty.
You thought you were safe in your C# bubble over there.
If starting out at a very high level and getting an understanding of how to develop, right, and you're taking a step and you're building up some confidence and understanding how to do it, I can see value in that. It doesn't mean that what you're doing is sustainable or is going to help you when it comes to, we have to support or having been as an incident or something where something is in production and you need to understand when things go wrong. But it does provide you with that initial step where you're actually building. There's some foundation that's coming from it. If you continue doing that, and that's the only approach you're taking at a very superficial level, at some point, you're going to start fading. You either be in a position that the opportunities is coming your way, is going to be in organizations where the expectation is just to do something quick, just to solve a small problem. But if you're looking for the opportunities of high-level systems, distributed systems, I think that requirement of having the fundamentals and understanding how it all fits together becomes more and more important. So if your journey is starting with just doing very high level, even to the point where you're using tools that removes understanding what is being generated, just so that you start getting a grasp of what it is, I think that's good enough. It's like having training wheels. Yeah. You're on the bike.
It's true. Yeah, it's absolutely true. You have to start somewhere, don't you? And you start at the lowest rung. So, but I guess you don't want to stay there, right?
And for some, it would be you start out and you go, hold on, this is generated and I can see this visual representation. How is that done? And you're going to start reading up and you're going to say, oh, there's an engine that does this, or actually there's some script. Yeah, if I look at a file in this folder, oh, wow. So this is actually generating that. That's amazing. For other people, you probably need to be nudged a bit. And that's where I think it's on the community or wherever you're working, those senior individuals. I think there's a responsibility on us to saying, hey, do you know how that works? If I woke you up at 2 a.m. and saying it's down, would you know what to do? And maybe that is the opportunity for somebody to go, all right, I've never thought of that.
Yep. I agreed. It's, I guess, like we can say to the junior developers listening, don't freak out too much about being called at 2 a.m. to fix a production problem. So
have fun. Just have fun. If you're a junior developer and you get called out by yourself 2 a.m, you should ask yourself, am I supposed to be the senior developer?
Am I working in the right team?
Because why am I being called out to deal with this? by myself.
Yeah.
Where's the
Yeah.
guardrails? Who's helping and supporting me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Fair enough. So if you could go back in time and give advice to your previous self, your young Fred avatar, what advice would you give yourself if you're starting out again and you know everything you know now? Would you change anything?
I mean, if I started out in today's time, there's definitely a few things I would do differently. And I think the acceleration that I was looking for would definitely be different because of the opportunities available, free opportunities, without requiring some money or an organization that's going to support you in that. So there's ample more opportunities available. Would I change? Probably not, because I think the journey itself has taught me quite a few things along the way. Maybe less in certain circumstances. I mean, a few questions, for instance, if I think about testing in comparison to where we are now, you would attend a conference and they would be talking about unit tests, and your brain goes, how is that possible? My code is not going to allow that. There's coupling that is preventing me from doing this. But if I look back, if it weren't for the situation I was in and the exposure that I got, I probably wouldn't be thinking about those kind of things. So I'm quite happy with the way it played out. I mean, there's been a few bumps along the way. But if I look at where I am now, I'm quite happy. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, I think my career actually, I landed in software development kind of accidentally, a happy accident, if you like. But I didn't really realize that that's where I wanted to be when I first landed in it. So I had my first job in tech was actually going and installing. So someone else had written the software, right? And it was installed on Windows computers out on site at a customer location, right? At their retail store. And I was the guy that would take the computer. It would all be preloaded, all set up, all that stuff. I would go take the computer and set it up on site and train the users how to use the software, right? So that was my first job in tech. Then one of the core developers left, and the owner of the business was like, hey, do you want to code? I was like, oh, yeah, okay. I've done a bit in university. I had no idea what I was doing, really. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll learn. So I just started learning under the mentorship of this guy. And, I give a lot of thanks and props to him because he taught me a lot of stuff. He was a wizard, basically, right, in the tools that we were using. He was of the old guard of developers that would use the old database tools in the DOS days and that kind of thing. I can't remember what the names of them were. Clipper, I think, was one of them. Really, your database and your programming were kind of all intertwined together, right? But he taught me a lot. I learned a huge amount from him. But when I went into my next role after that, I didn't go into a programming role. I went into like a tech support role, which is kind of weird. But when I did, I actually then taught myself. It was actually good that second role, when I went for the interview, they were making it out like it was really hard. Like, oh, this is a really hard job, like really difficult. It's going to be really stressful. I'm like, yeah, okay, it's fine. It's all good. I've got this, no worries. Then I got to the job and I was bored. Like, I only really had work for 2 days a week. So I had to think of something to do for the other 3 days. And the other 3 days, though, I just started building apps. Like, I started teaching myself Linux because I'd seen that at university as well and just was enamored with Unix. And so when Linux came along a little bit more after university years, where it could actually run on more hardware, I got to play with that because I couldn't run it on my home computer at the time back in 1995 or something. It wouldn't run on my home computer. So I had to wait till, there were a few more hardware support drivers and stuff like that available. And I started teaching myself Linux, and I started building all these apps, teaching myself different databases, MySQL, PHP, Perl. That was kind of what that was all the free stuff, actually. It was interesting because the first job I had was in Clarion, which is like a 4GL databasey Windows GUI thing. That, what you were saying before about paying for tooling, that was something like $3,000 USD or something like that, or $2,000 USD, like a lot of money for the IDE and the compiler and stuff, right? I mean, it was cool. It was cool software, but, really expensive. And when I just had 3 days available in my next job, and I was like, I'm bored, I need something to do. Linux was free, right? You just download an ISO, put it on a CD, put it into your computer and boot it. Perl was free, just came on Linux. PHP was free. Databases, open source, free. I learnt a huge amount of stuff in that time. And, it was kind of, but it was kind of accidental, I think. If you look at that path, I was teaching myself. I didn't have anyone to learn from. I was just learning from online resources. Maybe I bought a book. I think I bought a book about Perl. I bought a Perl book. Don't think I bought a PHP book because PHP's documentation was actually pretty good. But yeah, I just kind of learnt as I went and taught myself. And, it was probably a lot harder work doing that. So I think if I was to give myself advice, I think when I was at university, actually, my university degree was half hardware and half software. So I have a fairly, fundamental understanding of hardware, electronics, digital, analog electronics, that kind of thing. I did some of that study while I was at high school as well. So I've done some studies in that area. So, but when I got to university and I had hardware and software in the same degree, I actually realized I prefer software. Like, I would spend all my time sitting in the Unix in the labs at school, because luckily my course was within the engineering department, and the engineering department had these awesome DEC alphas and stuff, these massive, like, I can't remember how big they were, humongous flat screen CRTs, beautiful Unix workstations. They were just incredible, right? So I'd spend all my time in those labs, just like messing around with Unix, just like doing whatever, right? Learning stuff. It was cool, super awesome. So that's what I spent all my time doing. So software was like where I was drawn to. And I think if I could give myself advice, I would have said software is the way, Dan. Like, just don't get distracted by these other things. Just keep going with that. So I think I would give myself that advice. But it's all in hindsight, I guess, right?
Don't look back, because the bus is coming.
That's it. I mean, there's some things I wouldn't have changed. I mean, having an interest in Linux in the early years was really cool and taught me a huge amount. And that was really cool. And I guess having my own Linux server back in the days where there was no cloud, there was no, like we were saying before, right? If you had tools to develop in, you were usually paying for them back then. So the only way you could really use Perl was on Linux for free, basically, right? So it was like, if I wanted to learn to program, I guess I learnt Linux at the same time so that I could solve the problem of building an app and database, because I had a user there sitting next to me with an Access database in all sorts of pain every day because she was using Access to try and, database this and database that. I was like, I'll just build you something. I'll build this little app thing for you. So like, set up a Linux server, install Perl, let's go. Database. And it was great. It's gold. So I wouldn't change that, because that is like, I actually, I guess taught myself how to learn and my own self-motivated learning. I learned through these tooling. I learned a heap about all sorts of things to actually put an app together from start to finish. So I learned how to do the server administration, how to maintain it. I got hacked a couple of times, so I learned how to secure stuff and keep it up to date. I learned, how to put the database on there and have the whole stack. So I think if you look at it that way, there was some learnings in there that were pretty invaluable. So
keep on learning.
That's it, mate. That's it. So what do you think is the one thing, maybe we've already covered it, but what's the one thing, if you could pick one top thing out of your career that has given you the success that you've had so far? What do you think that one thing would be? What's the one element? Most important thing?
That's a difficult question. That is a very difficult question. I would say it's caring about people, being interested in people, being available. Because the thing that constantly changes, and you mentioned about how quickly technology changes, the practices, one moment cloud's the new thing, now it's just cloud. AI is the new thing. So there's always going to be something. But I think the thing that's consistent and really important, and people are craving for it, is having somebody available just to have a chat and saying, you can be yourself. I think that's the thing that's...
When do you think is that something you've always kind of just carried or gravitated towards, or was there a time when you realized this is really important?
I think it's probably grown over the years. It's definitely in the last few years it's become more prominent because I think the environment supports it more. So to put time aside to do it in my roles that I've had over the last few years, it becomes a key factor, and it suits me quite well. But I think it's always been there. But I think I'm just probably investing more and more into it, and probably getting a bit of reward out of it for myself and seeing the impact that I can make. I think we're all desperate just to be in a position to say to somebody, actually, I don't know what to do next, or should I worry about this? Or if I'm in a meeting, do I have to ask questions? Is that something we're supposed to do? People are going to think less of me if I don't ask questions. Just to be in a position to ask somebody without the person judging you, or because you can't always. It's hard to have conversations with your manager about stuff because it's not a natural relationship, because there's I am reporting to you. So you need some space. You need somebody just to go and say, I think I messed up today. And I'm a bit worried about that.
How do you think, like, it's not always, I think you're describing something that's very important, right? But there seems to be this struggle with being vulnerable about, like, asking some of those questions you're asking, like, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? How do you create the safety for people to do that? What do you think is a good mechanism for that?
Look, it's a first conversation. It's not going to be we're just going to be opening up, and it's just going to come out, and we're all going to be jumping up and down and saying, "Wow, a revelation!" But over time, and being very clear about the relationship, something that I've started doing is to emphasize that the space that we're in, this is the space where you can be yourself. If you want to rant about something, this is the space. If you're speaking to your manager, it's a different conversation. That's a strategic conversation, because everything you do in that space is calculated towards representing yourself in the best way to promote who you are as an individual and organization. That is not the time to have a rant or to display characteristics that is going to put you in a disadvantage. But in the space where we are now, you can talk about things that is really troubling you, and it stays in that space. I'm not here to judge you, and you're not reporting to me. I'm here to help and support and to challenge the conversation we're having. So if you're coming with something and saying, this has happened today and I think this is unfair and everybody's not doing this and I'm always doing this, it's not just that like, even this whole fine, but it's like, let's delve into that and look at it in a way to understand why is this happening? How can we change it? What actions? How do we measure it? Similar in our engineering practices to bring that into the equation. So we really work on getting a different perspective. But instead of having this bucket that gets filled up until somebody completely loses it or explodes or deteriorates in how they can contribute in the environment, they have a space where they can open that bucket and say, right, I just want to share about this. At the beginning, it's still, testing the waters, but over time, we start to really talk about things.
That's cool, man. It sounds like there's some. I reckon we could do a whole video on that topic.
That's my favorite.
Sounds good, mate. That's a future video topic locked in.
Done. It's a date. Ruby.
Sounds good,
delete,
mate.
Donuts. No go. And I have a date to talk about all good, fun things and sharing and caring.
Sounds good, mate. Sounds good. Well, this has been an awesome chat, man. I think we covered off some good stuff.
I think we definitely had some really good topics, good ideas, good challenges, some ideas for those who will be eavesdropping at some point to take away.
Yes.
Hold on. Who is this 2 donuts that I could follow on LinkedIn and maybe get some ideas from?
Yep. There'll be advice on whether to put sprinkles on your donut or not. Very important.
Most important thing, have fun.
That's very true. Awesome, man. Well, we've been ranting for this whole time, but we'd love to hear more about what you guys think. We are just 2 people, but we're sure that there is more opinions. And I actually think one of the things I have really enjoyed about posting on LinkedIn recently is that a lot of people come with comments and perspectives, which are just like, I get to learn from, and interact with a whole bunch of people. So I don't think we want this to just be you or me, even though it is right now. It's like we're having fun. But I think an important part of this is going to be what the rest of the community is going to bring. And even if you are watching this and you're a junior developer moving into the industry, I think it'd be cool to hear from people's experiences, how they're tracking their successes. And I'm sure send, what's your email address, Fred? And we'll get people to ask you for feedback on their code. What do you think?
My email address. I just hold on, Dan. I just want to find my email address. I haven't used my email address for so long. I would.
Let me get back to you. Is that what you saying?
I just want to have my black little book, my address book, and see if I can find my email address. No.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'll tell you what. In the meantime, they can send it to me, which is, my email address is Fred at. Hang on, I need a domain name. What's our domain name? You're going to come up with something where you can just contact me at Fred. If you got a complaint, just contact me at Fred at so-and-so. It's fine.
Mostly.
Awesome, mate. Well, very good. Let's chat again soon.
Let's do it again.